Good evening, everyone. We'll get ready for our regular meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Liz Schell, the chair, and we have with us Councillor Neal, vice chair, Councillor McLaren, Councillor Allen, and coming up very quickly is Councillor Turner. And we have a number of city staff with us this evening. We have our Director of Planning, Paige Agnew, Manager Vendetti. We have our clerk, John Bolognone, our head of legal, Ms. Nicholson, and planner Lambert, and manager Forfar. And I see John Henderson's here from housing, so I think he'll be here to answer any questions about the first item of business that we have this evening. We have a guest from Calgary, a planner from Calgary, actually, Jeff McLaren's brother, so he's come to observe. I think that's great. Thank you. And I will start, do I have the business? I do. Call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Neal and Councillor Turner seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. And we have the minutes of the meeting January 21st. Could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Turner, Councillor Allen seconds. Errors, omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's great, thank you. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Delegations, briefings? None. Business. And this one's very exciting for all of us. I brought my Rideau Heights Regeneration Strategy with me because it was a pretty exciting document. So this has to do with 80 Daly Street, 50 Macaulay, and 199 Wilson Street. And Mr. Henderson, did you want to give us a little overview?
Sure, yeah, I'll do that.
That's
great. So I liked you had the document there. It's great that it's gotten around. But the Rideau Heights Regeneration Strategy really is the phase one implementation is really what's being discussed here, or what's on the agenda. And it's interesting, the impetus for the community center has been there for a long time, but with the comprehensive look at the neighborhood that we did through the regeneration strategy, there was an opportunity to consider the configuration of the park and the associated housing blocks to try and do that area better. So we've been calling the Shannon Park, we've been calling it the enhanced plan for Shannon Park, because it's changed as a result of the city's focused look at Rideau Heights broadly, but also the age of the house stock that was decommissioned and demolished, and then the ability to rearrange the park. So the approvals tonight will implement the vision for the park and the planning work that's gone on, and it's great to see this first piece coming together of the regeneration strategy implement KFHC's direction for the Housing Corporation's direction for revitalizing their housing stock and providing better facilities in Rideau Heights.
Great, thank you very much. Now we do have a recommendation that I'd like us to put on the floor, and then we can ask any questions that we would like. Would anyone like to move a second? Councillor Turner moves, Councillor Neal seconds. And chance for questions of staff about this project, if you would like. Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Neal.
Just a really quick comment. I think that the overall plan is going to achieve something that's quite overdue, and I particularly like the concept of having a new roadway within the center of that property. It was built in a time when Jane Jacobs had just moved to Toronto, and not a lot of people were listening to her, but the whole concept of eyes on the street, eyes on the community, that having a roadway adds to that influence, and then reconfiguring the properties so that they look onto that land, not just the main collector streets and residential streets. So I think I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good plan when it's realized. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will call the question. All those in favor? That's great. Thank you very much. And our second item of business is the application for zoning bylaw amendment, 720 Princess Street. And I think there are some questions, but shall we put it on the floor and you can ask some questions? Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Turner. Questions for staff? Councillor Neal?
Yes, I gave a heads up with these questions, but not with a lot of lead time because it's been a busy couple of days with extra council meetings and such. I couldn't remember whether this application actually predated. I know it didn't predate the Williamsville secondary plan, so the principles were in place, but I'm not sure that the zoning, this came prior to the passage of the zoning. And some of my questions related to whether it should be in full compliance with the current Williamsville corridor zoning or not. So if it's possible to get an answer whether the initial application came in and was accepted as complete prior to the new zoning being in place.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The application is a 2014 application, so it has been reviewed against the official plan policies for the Williamsville Main Street study that have been implemented. The C4 zone, which is the zone that put in place to implement the Williamsville study, is the zoning that's on the property today, and it's recommended to amend that C4 zoning to accommodate this proposal.
Okay, thank you. My particular questions and concerns had to do with the fact that there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. And I want to say straight up, I totally endorse and accept the concept of this being affordable housing and being housing first, rapid rehousing units. But when we're on the planning committee, we need to take off our Housing and Homelessness Committee hats and test the application against the zoning. And my questions were that it was my understanding that the zoning language, that the Williamsville plan, definitely the secondary plan, suggested the idea of commercial on the first floor at streetscape level. And I think the zoning embraced that concept. The other thing is the parking. Right now, there are a number of existing non-conforming use parking used car lots along that stretch. And until they change their use, they, by right, can continue to have street level parking. But it was my understanding that there wouldn't be in new development parking within view of the streetscape. And phase 2 may achieve that, but phase 1 that's before us tonight doesn't achieve that. And I'm just wondering what assurances we might have that phase 2 is actually going to happen. We won't end up with agreeing to phase 1 and then in perpetuity looking at cars parked at street level. So perhaps staff could comment on those two aspects.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. With respect to the site, one thing that I'd like to clarify just to begin with is that the use that's there is a conforming use. It's a legal conforming use that's permitted under the zoning bylaw. So the motel that's there today is a legal conforming use. The residential use that's proposed would be a conforming use under the existing zoning. The site can be used for multi-residential. What's non-complying on the site are the setbacks of the existing building that sits there today. So the yards on that building don't comply with the setbacks. So it's really the provision standards of the zone with respect to where a building is located that this property doesn't comply with as it sits today. So for phase 1 of the development, that's what needs to be addressed specifically for allowing the residential use to occur in there. With respect to phase 2, one thing actually that I would also like to clarify with your discussion around parking lots. What's there today is parking associated with the motel. And what would be there through the zoning amendment would be parking associated with the multi-residential use. The provisions that prohibit surface parking lots are for surface parking lots that are just that. So there are policies that speak to discouraging surface parking and not want to see surface parking, and as a property redevelops, encouraging that parking to be located underground or in rear courtyards so it's not visible from the street and doesn't disrupt the streetscape, which is what phase 2 of this proposal does by building that street wall across the front of the site. So in terms of the overall zoning that's proposed, what they are asking for relief on is really, a lot of it relates to the existing location of the building. They're looking for relief as it relates to amenity space. What they are requesting is in line with the amenity space recommendation that has been presented to the committee previously. With respect to the ground floor, we've recognized that there's an existing portion of the structure at the streetscape on Princess Street that's the existing office. It doesn't have the floor-to-ceiling height that's recommended in the zoning to allow for the conversion to commercial, but it's already commercial. So the policies for that area within Williamsville allow for at-grade residential with the provision that the floor-to-ceiling height in new construction provided to allow that space to be converted to a commercial use. So we have included provisions in the recommended zoning to allow that opportunity when the second phase is built to build that street wall and allow the opportunity for that space to be used for either a commercial or a residential use. As we indicated through our dealings with the applicant on this site, initially when this proposal came in, it didn't comply with the provision or the policies of the official plan as it related to the Williamsville policies for angular plane, the street wall, building the street wall. So we did go through a series of meetings and negotiations with the applicant to modify the design of this proposal to try to bring it into compliance with the official plan, because initially our position was that if it didn't comply with the official plan and some of the design policies given the renovation, we weren't going to be supportive of that. So the applicant did respond with a revised proposal, which is in front of the committee this evening, to address a lot of our concerns to ensure that what's being brought forward does comply with the policies and the goals and objectives of the Williamsville study.
A couple of things, if I could just follow up. If you could, because I've read the Williamsville, as you're aware, I've read the zoning and I read the secondary plan report fairly thoroughly. And if you can send me an email and show me, because I may have missed it, that where it says first floor commercial if necessary, but not necessarily first floor commercial. Because that aspect of it, I thought it was a thou shall. So if you could point me in that direction, I would appreciate it. So, thank you.
Absolutely, through you, Madam Chair. On that, there in the policy documents, there's sections where ground floor is considered mandatory and sections where it's not. So this is in one of the stretches, I believe, of Princess Street where it's considered optional as opposed to mandatory. But we're happy to send that reference to you.
And my other question, and it's just to ward off any possible grounds for an OMB appeal or whatever, is and I've had many conversations with legal over the 13 years I've been on council, talking about how we define existing non-conforming use, because it's something that comes up frequently. And I can't get my head around the fact that it could be a motel and then be converted to residential and it would still be in compliance as far as use goes.
Through you, Madam Chair, the zone, the C4 zone, which applies to the property as a commercial zone, that zone allows for motels, it allows for a range of commercial uses, it allows for multifamily residential. Non-conforming applies to use. The use that's proposed and existing on the site are conforming uses. There's no question about the use themselves. Complying, legal non-complying or non-complying, relates to structures and setbacks and speaks to those elements of the zone. So the building that's on the property today is legal non-complying because it doesn't meet the side yard setback and the rear yard setback. And the reason for that is because it was built legally prior to the passing of the existing bylaw that's in place. It's a non-complying structure, but the use within that non-complying structure is a legal conforming use in accordance with the zoning bylaw.
And that would definitely stand up to an OMB appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very clear. I just learned something else today. Are there any other questions? Councillor Allen?
Thank you. And I had some questions about the commercial use as well. And I'd just like to ask, I could think because this is sort of new, where they're building to convert if the market demand exists in the future. And I'd like to be able to see, when we know this, if we could track when those building permits come in and see if those kinds of, if this process is working for us or not, so that we can, so that when we look at these policies 10, 15 years from now, we can say, okay, well, we've established this sort of optional but build to convert. Did it happen or did it not happen, and why? I'd love to be able to maybe be on council 15 years from now and see that report. And so that would be something that I'd like to ask, if there's a process or something to kind of tick those boxes when those building permits come in. I'm not sure if that's possible.
Through you, Madam Chair. So hopefully you're not going to have to wait 15 years. That's a piece of work that our policy group is, we have elements of it now, but as you are aware, with me overseeing planning, building, and licensing services, we have a lot of emphasis right now on integration of our services and looking for the opportunity to see where we can be tracking building activity from cradle to grave, basically from conception of idea through the development approvals of process, through the building associated processes, and on through the licensing and enforcement piece as it would associate with that particular use. So in terms of the building process, we do have the ability through CityView to be tracking when things go to occupancy, and we're looking right now at reporting protocols of how we can better be tracking not just units that are draft approved or approved, but what position they're going through in terms of occupancy, what level of occupancy, how many units are building out when, so that we have a really good feeling at all times how many units are available in the market. So it is something that we're working on. It won't take 15 years, I guarantee that, but we do need a little bit more time to be able to pull that all together for you comprehensively.
Great, thank you. And not in a rush, because I realize that it's something that we'll be tracking over time, and that's why I said 15 years, but 5's great. The other question I had has to do with the entrance and exits. I don't know if there was a conversation at some point with this application about having entrances and exits off of Toronto Street and reducing the curb cuts on Princess Street, where we have buses and cycle lanes and pedestrians and parking. It would make it safer for everyone if the curb cuts were not on the busy street, but the current use is off of there, is what it looks like. But I was wondering if there was a conversation and consideration about changing that.
Through you, Madam Chair, there was definitely a conversation about that. Our preference absolutely was to try and see if it was possible to bring some of that traffic in from Toronto Street. There's currently 2 curb cuts on the property now. So they are maintaining the existing access points. When they looked at the access point from Toronto Street, in order to achieve a through traffic pattern, it ate up a lot of parking spaces and impacted the traffic circulation on site. One of the elements of our discussion with the applicant was to ensure that we could also accommodate a loading space on site to make sure that move in, move out, as well as if there was a commercial establishment on the site, could be serviced by a loading bay. And when you look at the traffic circulation and the movements required for a loading space as well, it wasn't possible to use the Toronto Street access point. If you do look at the site plan, what you will notice is there's a garbage enclosure structure towards the back portion of the site at the end of the Toronto Street. So garbage will be removed from the site from that access point rather than bringing it in through Princess Street. So we did have plans and iterations that looked at those opportunities, but it didn't turn out to be the most functional layout for the site.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. There was one question I forgot to ask. I will say I won't be here in 15 years' time, so I hope that data comes in sooner. I mentioned this before. I like the idea that the Phase 2 build-out will, in fact, shield Princess Street from the parking. I guess my only concern, and being the nature of this application and doing phased in, I guess my concern, my cautionary note is if Phase 1 gets achieved, then the parking throughout the period of Phase 1 will, in fact, be totally visible from the street, which isn't ideal given the secondary plan and the existing zoning. When Phase 2 is completed, that will shield that parking from the sight line from Princess Street. Is there any timeline that's been suggested for Phase 2? And does the city have any ability to, through site plan, even if you said if Phase 2 doesn't happen within X number of years, we will landscape and put an ornamental fence in so that we will shield the parking from being in full view of Princess Street? Anything like that would at least mitigate the fact that we're going to have parking within sight of Princess Street. Could you comment on that?
Yep, through you, Madam Chair. The parking as it sits today is an existing legal non-complying situation. And what's proposed to be there for Phase 1 of the development is exactly what's there today. So we don't have a mechanism with respect to the Phase 1 to require that along Princess Street. Phase 1 as it is proposed doesn't even require site plan control approval because it's within the walls of the existing structure. With respect to Phase 2, we can't put a time frame on that. I mean, if the zoning is approved, the applicant will require site plan approval. We will get the applications for that and process them as they're submitted. But as with any other project, there's no guarantee that the developer is actually going to build it or on what timeline. Obviously, based on the negotiations and the discussions we've had with the developer and the significant investment that's been made to date, we're anticipating that this is going to proceed in a timely fashion, but we don't have those timelines available to us.
I hope your optimism is well-founded. Thank you.
Councillor Turner?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question about the parking, not to go on about the aesthetics of it, but actually the numbers. So it's going to provide, according to the report here, 34 parking spaces, and the units, there's going to be 68 units in the building. So let's say there's one person per unit, that's 68 potential cars, maybe more people per unit. Will that be enough parking, and is that within our requirements and bylaws and everything?
Through you, Madam Chair, the applicant did provide a parking study that indicated that the supply of parking would be sufficient for the use on the site. The unit composition within the structure is primarily bachelors and 1- and 2-bedroom units, so that is very helpful in terms of looking at that parking. The ratio that is being recommended is also the same as the ratio that was recently supported and approved for the Princess and University applications, so it's consistent with other developments that have been supported in the general area. In addition, they also looked at the other developments in the area and other buildings that they operate, and based on their surveys, they are coming in at around a 0.2 of what the actual uptake would be. So they feel that the parking that they're proposing is more than adequate for what they're putting forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm just a little nervous about not having enough parking spots per building. It just makes me nervous. But I do know downtown people do walk and they do bike. Thank you.
No other questions? I will call the motion or call the recommendation. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We have two pieces of, we have no motions, notices of motions, other business. Two pieces of correspondence. And the next meeting is February the 18th at 6:30. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Allen, Councillor Turner, all those in favor? Thank you. That's great.